The metal ship floated quietly in the cold darkness beyond Neptune. Inside, alien eyes watched Earth through powerful machines that could see everything happening on the blue planet below. Commander Velthor stood before a wall of glowing screens, his tall gray body casting shadows in the dim light of the observation room. "Show me the latest reports," he said to his assistant. The screens filled with images of humans fighting wars, building cities, and going about their daily lives. For 300 years, the Zephyrian Collective had been watching. They had recorded every battle, every invention, every moment of human history they could capture. To them, humans were like insects under a microscope, interesting, but simple to understand. The creatures follow predictable patterns, Velthar noted as he watched footage of a human military exercise. They fight for land, for resources, for their tribes, just like every other primitive species we have encountered. His assistant nodded. "Our computers have analyzed millions of hours of their behavior. Humans are emotional beings who make decisions based on fear, anger, and basic survival needs. When threatened, they either run or fight. When they fight, they use whatever weapons they have, until one side wins or loses." Velthar smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Perfect. That makes them useful, but controllable." The aliens had studied human wars from ancient times to the present day. They had watched Roman soldiers march across Europe, seen knights clash in medieval battles, and observed modern armies with their tanks and planes. Every strategy, every weapon, every tactic had been carefully recorded and analyzed. The Zephyrians believed they understood exactly how humans thought and fought, but they only looked at the surface of things. On Earth, thousands of miles below the hidden alien ship, Captain Li Kang sat in his small apartment in Seoul. The young military officer was reading an old book, his grandfather's diary from the Korean War. The pages were yellow with age, and some of the ink had faded, but the words still carried power. "Today we held Hill 255 against impossible odds." One entry read, "We could have retreated and saved our lives, but the civilians in the valley below needed time to escape." Sergeant Park said it best, "Some things are worth dying for, even when dying accomplishes nothing except doing what is right." Kong turned the page and continued reading. His grandfather wrote about soldiers who shared their last food with hungry children, about men who carried wounded enemies to safety, about moments when warriors chose honor over survival. These were not the actions of simple creatures, driven by fear and anger. But the aliens watching from space saw none of this. Their machines could record words and actions, but they could not measure the human heart. They saw soldiers fighting, and assumed it was about territory or resources. They watched humans help each other, and marked it down as tribal cooperation for survival. Everything was reduced to data points and statistics. "Sir," the assistant said, pulling up new information on the screens. "We have completed our analysis of human military capabilities. Their weapons are crude compared to ours. Their technology is centuries behind what we possess. Even their most powerful nuclear weapons would barely damage our shields." Velthar studied the numbers with satisfaction. And their military organization, simple command structures. They rely heavily on individual decision-making at lower levels, which creates chaos and inefficiency. Our battle computers predict a 97% probability of victory in any direct conflict. What the aliens did not understand was that this seeming weakness was actually humanity's greatest strength. Human soldiers were trained not just to follow orders, but to think for themselves, to make moral choices, to sacrifice for others even when no one commanded them to do so. In another part of Seoul, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Hai was reviewing reports at her desk. She had spent years studying military history, not just tactics and strategy, but the stories of individuals who had made extraordinary choices in desperate moments. She knew about the ancient knights who lived by codes of honor, about modern soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends, about ordinary people who became heroes when the situation demanded it. These stories were not in the alien databases. The Watchers in space had recorded the battles, but they had missed the souls of the warriors. As night fell over Earth, the alien ship continued its silent observation. Velthor felt confident that humanity would soon join the Zephyrian collective, willingly or not. His species had conquered a dozen worlds by understanding their enemies completely. Humans would be no different. But in the darkness of space, something important was hidden from the alien sensors. Something that could not be measured, or quantified, or reduced to simple data. The aliens had studied humanity's wars, its weapons, and its weaknesses. They had cataloged every battle and analyzed every strategy. They had learned everything about how humans fight, but they had never understood why humans fight, and that difference would change everything. The morning sky over Seoul turned dark as massive shadows fell across the city. Captain Park Jin was drinking coffee in the military base cafeteria when the alarms started screaming. He ran outside and looked up to see something that made his blood freeze. A ship hung in the air above the Han River. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, a kilometer of dark metal that blocked out the sun. Similar vessels appeared over New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, and dozens of other major cities around the world. They came without warning, without sound, simply materializing in Earth's atmosphere like ghosts made real. All units to battle. Stations, Park Jin shouted into his radio, though he knew their weapons were useless against something so massive. The ship's hull gleamed with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside the alien vessel, Commander Velthor stood on the bridge, surrounded by glowing control panels. Through the transparent dome above his head, he could see the human city spread out below like a map. Tiny vehicles moved along the streets like ants, and he could detect the electromagnetic signatures of their primitive communication systems, going wild with panic. Begin the broadcast, he ordered. Every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth suddenly carried the same message. The voice spoke in perfect English, Mandarin, Korean, Spanish, and dozens of other languages. Simultaneously, "People of Earth," the voice said, calm and emotionless. "We are the Zephyrian Collective. We have observed your species for many years. We know your capabilities, your history, and your nature. You are a young race with potential, but you lack the wisdom to guide yourselves properly." In the underground, command bunker, beneath Seoul, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Hai watched the broadcast with growing anger. The aliens' words were polite, but the meaning was clear. Around the conference table, generals and politicians argued in hushed voices about what to do. "We offer you a place in our Galactic Confederation," the voice continued. "As junior partners, you will benefit from our advanced technology and protection. Your wars will end. Your suffering will cease. You will have peace under our guidance." President Park Yoon sat in the secure facility beneath the Blue House, surrounded by advisors who all seemed to be talking at once. Some urged immediate surrender. What chance did Earth have against technology that could make ships appear from nowhere? Others pushed for negotiation, hoping to find some middle ground. A few military leaders quietly suggested preparing for war, though they all knew it would be hopeless. However, the alien voice added, and something in its tone made everyone listening feel cold. "This offer requires your complete cooperation. You will surrender all military forces to our control. Your governments will be dissolved and replaced with administrators we select. Your primitive weapons programs will be terminated. You have 72 hours to accept these terms." The broadcast ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Commander Velthor reviewed the human response data as it poured in. Their communication networks were buzzing with activity, fear, confusion, desperate attempts to organize some kind of resistance. It was exactly what his studies had predicted. Faced with superior force, humans would either submit or make futile gestures of defiance, before submitting anyway. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting increased military activity around their major installations. Some of their aircraft are taking off, though they remain at a safe distance." "Expected behavior," Velthar replied. "They are testing our capabilities and showing defiance to maintain morale among their population. Once they realize the futility of resistance, they will accept our terms." But something was happening that the aliens had not anticipated. In military bases around the world, soldiers were not discussing surrender. Captain Park Jin gathered his men in the barracks and looked at their young faces. Most were barely 20 years old, fresh recruits who had never seen real combat. "They think they know us," he said quietly. 3 centuries of watching from the shadows, analyzing our every move, and they think we are just another species to be conquered. One of the younger soldiers raised his hand. "Sir, what are our orders?" "Park." Jin was quiet for a moment. Above them, the alien ship waited like a predator, confident in its superiority. The creature commanding that vessel had studied human military tactics, human weapons, human fears. It had calculated the odds and found them acceptable. But there was something the aliens had never seen in their data, something that could not be measured by their instruments or predicted by their computers. In the depths of human nature, beneath the surface behaviors they had catalogued so carefully, lay something that would surprise them. "Lieutenant Colonel." Kim Hai stood before a wall map, marked with defensive positions that everyone knew were useless. She thought about her grandfather's stories of the Korean War, of soldiers who had faced impossible odds with nothing but determination and courage. "Ma'am," her aide asked, "what should we tell the other commanders?" Kim Hai looked at the alien ship visible through the bunker's periscope. Soon, they would have their answer. The aliens expected submission or token resistance followed by quick surrender. They had studied humanity's wars and deemed their victory certain. They were about to learn the difference between studying war and understanding warriors. President Park Yoon stood before the cameras in the secure bunker, her voice steady despite the enormous alien ships hanging over every major city on Earth. The world watched as she delivered humanity's answer. "We have considered your offer," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Humanity declines. We will not surrender our freedom, our governments, or our right to determine our own future. If you want this world, you will have to take it." The response was immediate. Within minutes of the broadcast, the alien ships began to move. Commander Velthar watched the human leader's defiant words with mild amusement. "Predictable," he told his officers. "They are making a show of bravery for their population. Begin the invasion. Target their military installations first. Once we demonstrate our superior firepower, they will surrender within days." The attack began at sunrise over the Pacific. Sleek alien fighters poured from the massive ships like angry wasps, their energy weapons carving through the sky with deadly precision. The first target was Osan Air Base in South Korea, where Major Kim Bo was already in his cockpit, leading Dragon Squadron into what everyone knew was a hopeless fight. "Dragon Flight, this is Dragon Leader." Kim Bo's voice crackled over the radio as his F-16 climbed toward the alien fighters. "Remember, we are not here to win this fight. We are here to buy time for the civilian evacuation." The alien fighters were faster, stronger, and armed with weapons that could slice through Earth's best jets like paper. One by one, Dragon Squadron began to fall. But something strange happened that made the alien pilots pause in confusion. When Lieutenant Song Min's fighter took a direct hit and started spinning toward the ground, he did not try to save himself. Instead, he aimed his burning plane at an alien bomber that was heading toward a convoy of refugee buses below. The explosion took out both aircraft, but the buses escaped safely. In the alien command ship, Tactical Officer Corvish studied his screens with growing concern. "Commander, the humans are behaving strangely. They are sacrificing their superior units to protect non-combatants." This does not match our behavioral predictions. Velthar frowned. Explain. They are choosing to lose valuable military assets to save civilians who contribute nothing to their war effort. It is inefficient. The pattern repeated across the globe. Human pilots crashed their damaged planes into alien bombers to protect cities. Tank crews held hopeless positions to cover retreating civilians. Everywhere the aliens expected quick victory, they found humans willing to die for reasons that made no tactical sense. At the Busan perimeter, Staff Sergeant Oh Jun crouched behind a concrete barrier with 12 Marines. They were the last line of defense between the alien ground forces and the evacuation ships at the harbor. Behind them, thousands of civilians were still boarding the vessels that would carry them to safety. "Sir, we are completely surrounded," his radio man reported. "Enemy forces outnumber us 50 to 1. Orders to fall back." Oh-jun checked his rifle and looked at the young faces around him. Most of these Marines had never been in combat before. Today, they were scared, but they had not run. Through his binoculars, he could see alien soldiers advancing across the open ground, their advanced weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. "How long until the last ship is loaded?" he asked. 30 minutes, sir." Oh-jun nodded and settled into his firing position. "Then we hold for 30 minutes, Marines. Not 29 minutes. Not 31 minutes. 30 minutes exactly." The aliens came in waves, expecting the small human force to break and run when faced with overwhelming odds. Instead, the Marines fought with a determination that defied logic. When Private Yu ran out of ammunition, he used his knife. When Corporal Lee's position was overrun, he detonated a grenade that took 6 aliens with him. Commander Velthar watched the battle reports with growing unease. His forces were winning every engagement, but the victories felt wrong somehow. The humans were not fighting like a species trying to survive. They were fighting like something else entirely. Sir Corvish reported, "The small unit at Busan has been eliminated, but they held their position for 43 minutes. The civilian ships escaped. 43 minutes. Veltar turned from his tactical display. "Our projections showed they would break in less than 10 minutes when faced with those odds." "Yes, sir. But they did not break. They fought until every soldier was dead." Across the battlefield, the same story repeated. Human units that should have surrendered or retreated instead chose to fight hopeless battles. They died defending positions with no strategic value simply because civilians sheltered there. They threw away their lives to save strangers, to buy time for others to escape, to protect people who could not protect themselves. The aliens had studied human warfare for centuries. They knew about tactics, weapons, and battle strategies. They had cataloged every type of soldier and every form of combat, but they had never encountered anything like this. These humans were not fighting for territory or resources, or even survival. They were fighting for something the aliens could not understand or measure, something that made them willing to charge into certain death with their heads held high and their weapons ready. The invasion was succeeding, but Commander Velthor was beginning to realize that winning battles and conquering a species were two very different things. Colonel Li Su sat in the cold metal chair, his hands bound behind his back but his spine straight as an arrow. The alien interrogation room was bare except for a single bright light that hurt his eyes. Across from him, Commander Velthor studied the human prisoner with genuine curiosity that had replaced his earlier confidence. "Your military forces have lost 60% of their strength," the alien commander said, his translator making his words sound flat and emotionless. "Your major cities are under siege. Your government leaders are hiding in underground bunkers, yet your people continue to resist. I do not understand why." Li Su looked up at his captor without fear. Blood from a cut on his forehead had dried on his face, but his eyes were clear and steady. "You have been watching us for 300 years, haven't you?" "Yes." We have studied your species extensively. We know your military capabilities, your weapons, your strategies, your weaknesses, but you never understood your enemy." Li Su's voice was quiet but firm. "You watched our wars, but you never learned about our warriors." Velthar leaned forward, his gray skin catching the harsh light, explained, "You saw the sword, but you missed the code that guided the hand holding it." The alien's translator struggled with some of the words, making strange clicking sounds as it tried to find meanings in the Safarian language. "Code? You mean your military procedures?" Li Su almost smiled. "No, something much older and much more important. Honor, duty, the willingness to stand between evil and innocent people, even when it costs us everything we have." While the interrogation continued in the alien ship, the war on Earth raged on with increasing desperation. In the subway tunnels beneath Seoul, Captain Nam Young led a squad of 12 volunteers through the dark passages. Above them, alien patrols controlled the streets, hunting for any humans who had not yet been captured or killed. "Captain," whispered Sergeant Kim, "the thermal scanners show at least 300 civilians trapped in the subway station ahead. But there are alien patrols between us and them." Nam Young checked her rifle and looked at her soldiers. They were exhausted, running low on ammunition, and outnumbered by an enemy with superior technology. The smart thing to do would be to retreat and save their own lives. The logical thing would be to accept that 300 people were already lost. "We are going to get them out," she said simply. "Ma'am, the tunnels ahead are crawling with hostiles. It is a suicide mission." Nam Young thought about her daughter. Safe in one of the evacuation ships that had escaped 3 days earlier because other soldiers had chosen to die holding a position. Then it is a suicide mission. But those people are counting on us. They moved through the tunnels like ghosts, using every trick they had learned in urban warfare training. When they reached the trapped civilians, Nam Young saw families huddled together in the darkness, children crying softly, elderly people too, weak to run, wounded survivors from the surface battles. "We are going to get you out of here," she told them. "Follow my soldiers. Stay quiet. Stay together." The journey back was a nightmare of running battles in the narrow tunnels. One by one, Nam Young's squad fell to alien weapons, each death-buying precious minutes for the civilians to keep moving. Corporal Park died holding a tunnel junction so the group could pass. Private Song sacrificed herself to disable an alien scout robot that would have revealed their position. When they finally reached the surface exit, only Nam Young and 2 soldiers remained alive, but all 300 civilians were safe, back. In the interrogation room, Commander Velthor was growing frustrated with his prisoner's strange words. "You speak of honor and duty as if they were weapons. These are just concepts, ideas that exist only in your minds." "That is exactly right," Li Su said. "They exist in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls, and that makes them more powerful than any weapon you possess. Impossible. Ideas cannot stop plasma weapons or deflect energy beams." Li Su looked directly into the alien's eyes. "Ideas make people willing to charge into plasma fire. Ideas make soldiers choose certain death to save strangers. Ideas turn ordinary humans into something you cannot defeat, no matter how superior your technology might be." Velthar consulted his tactical displays, showing the continuing battles across Earth. His forces were winning every engagement, but the victories felt hollow. Human units consistently chose death over surrender. They fought for positions with no military value, simply because civilians sheltered there. They made tactical decisions that defied every rule of warfare his computers understood. "Your people called them knights," Li Su continued. "Warriors who lived by a code that said some things are worth dying for. That code never died. It just changed form, but the heart of it remained the same. We fight not because we can win, but because fighting is right." The alien commander was silent for a long moment, processing information that made no sense according to his understanding of warfare and survival. In his databases, he had detailed analyses of human weapons, human tactics, human fears, and motivations, but nowhere in those files was there any mention of the human capacity for noble sacrifice, for choosing death over dishonor, for embracing hopeless causes because they were just causes. The Zephyrians had studied humanity's battles, but they had never understood its heroes. The final battle began at dawn over Incheon Harbor, where the last evacuation ships waited like sleeping giants on the dark water. General Park Day stood on the concrete pier with the remnants of his command, 45 soldiers who had somehow survived 3 weeks of impossible fighting. Behind them, the final group of civilian refugees hurried toward the waiting vessels. General Lieutenant Yu Min reported, her uniform torn and dirty from the long retreat. The civilians need 15 more minutes to get everyone aboard the ships. Park Day looked at his exhausted troops. These men and women had fought across half of Korea, falling back from position to position, buying time with their blood for others to escape. Most were barely standing, held up by determination and little else. Ahead of them, alien forces numbering in the thousands advanced across the open ground like a dark tide. 15 minutes, Park Day repeated, checking his rifle one final time. Then 15 minutes, it is. Commander Velthor personally led the final assault from his command vehicle, confident that this would end the human resistance once and for all. His tactical computers showed overwhelming superiority, 3,000 alien soldiers against less than 50 humans. The battle should be over in minutes. All units advance, he ordered. Eliminate the remaining human forces and secure the harbor. But as his troops moved forward, something happened that shattered every prediction his computers had made. The humans did not fall back to defensive positions. They did not try to find cover or preserve their forces for a longer fight. They charged. 45 humans against 3,000 aliens, running toward certain death, with weapons raised and voices lifted in an ancient war cry that echoed across the harbor. It was not a tactical decision or a strategic maneuver. It was something far more dangerous. It was pure courage, given physical form. Private Wan Su saw an alien grenade arcing toward his squad and threw himself on top of it without hesitation. The explosion killed him instantly, but his sacrifice saved 5 other soldiers who kept running toward the enemy lines. Sergeant Bay. He knelt in the open ground with her last rocket launcher, ignoring the energy beams flashing around her as she took careful aim at an alien walker. She could have found cover, could have lived a few minutes longer, but the walker's weapons threatened the evacuation ships. She fired her rocket and died with a smile on her face as the enemy machine exploded. Captain Chomin's rifle ran empty when he was still 50 meters from the alien command post. Without pause, he drew his knife and kept charging. When the blade broke against alien armor, he used his bare hands. When alien soldiers surrounded him, he fought until his heart stopped beating, his fingers still reaching for his sidearm. General Park Day fell within sight of Commander Velthor's position. 3 bullet wounds in his chest and a 4th in his leg. As he died, he managed to pull the pin from his last grenade, taking 2 alien soldiers with him into darkness. The battle lasted 18 minutes. Every human soldier died, but every civilian escaped safely to the ships, which disappeared into the morning mist, carrying the future of humanity to safety. Commander Velthor stood among the bodies of his enemies, staring at the scene with confusion that bordered on fear. His forces had won the engagement completely. The humans were all dead. The harbor was secured. By every measure, his species understood. This was a perfect victory. But something fundamental had broken in his understanding of warfare, of conquest, of what it meant to defeat an enemy. Sir, his aide approached carefully, stepping over the body of a young human soldier who had died with his weapon still pointed toward the alien lines. Your orders for the occupation? Velthor was quiet for a long moment, looking at the evacuation ships disappearing on the horizon. These humans had not fought for territory or resources or even survival. They had fought for something his species had no word for, no concept to encompass. They had fought like the ancient warriors in their history files, the ones called knights. But those were just stories, myths from a primitive past. These modern humans were supposed to be different, practical, logical. Instead, they had chosen to die for strangers, to sacrifice everything for people they had never met, to embrace certain death because it was the right thing to do. Sir, his aide repeated. Orders. Signal the fleet, Velthor said quietly. Full withdrawal from this system. Sir, but we have one. The human military is destroyed. Their governments have fallen. The planet is ours. Velthar turned away from the battlefield, his gray face troubled. We have not won anything. We can kill them, but we cannot break them. And an enemy you cannot break is more dangerous than any weapon in the universe. The Zephyrian fleet departed Earth's orbit that same day. In their vast cultural database, they added a single new entry: species classification, human displays. Inexplicable willingness to embrace death for abstract concepts. Behavior similar to legendary warrior caste. Recommend complete avoidance in future operations. The universe was vast, with countless worlds to conquer. But the aliens had learned something that would haunt them forever. Some enemies fight with more than weapons and strategy. Some enemies fight with their souls.